farm life and city living, the scent of soil and perfume, waking with the sunrise and dancing in nightclubs until dawn. Sarah had to choose between two worlds. But sometimes, what the heart wants is far more complicated than what the mind says. The morning mist clung to the rolling hills of Meadowbrook Valley as Sarah Mitchell stepped out of her family's farmhouse, breathing in the crisp autumn air. At 26, she had never lived anywhere else, never wanted to. The 100 acres of farmland that had been in her family for 4 generations was not just her home, it was her identity. Sarah walked through the apple orchard her grandfather had planted, checking on the late harvest. Her hands, calloused from years of farm work, moved expertly among the branches, selecting the ripest fruit. This land had taught her everything about patience, seasons, and the quiet satisfaction of working in harmony with nature. She was kneeling in the vegetable garden, harvesting the last of the season's tomatoes, when she heard the unfamiliar sound of an expensive car engine purring down their gravel road. Sarah looked up to see a sleek black BMW pulling into their driveway, a car that probably cost more than her family made in 2 years. The man who stepped out looked like he had walked off the pages of a business magazine. Tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, with dark hair and sharp features that spoke of success and confidence. He was clearly not from around here. "Excuse me," he called out as he approached the garden. "I'm looking for Mr. Thomas Mitchell. I'm Michael Sterling from Sterling Development Corporation." Sarah stood up, brushing dirt from her jeans, suddenly conscious of her simple work clothes and messy ponytail. "He's my father. He's in the barn. I can show you the way." As they walked across the farmyard, Michael seemed to be taking in everything around him: the old red barn, the chicken coop, the rolling pastures where their small herd of cattle grazed peacefully. His expression was unreadable, professional, but Sarah caught him glancing at her more than once. "Beautiful property," he commented. "How long has your family owned this land?" 4 generations, Sarah replied with unmistakable pride. "My great-grandfather cleared this land with his own hands. We grow apples, vegetables, raise cattle. It's not the biggest operation, but it's sustainable." They found Thomas Mitchell in the barn, repairing a piece of equipment with the patient skill that came from decades of making do with what you had. At 62, he was still a strong man, but Sarah could see the worry lines that had appeared on his face over the past year. "Mr. Mitchell," Michael extended his hand. "I'm Michael Sterling. We spoke on the phone about your property." Thomas wiped his hands on a rag before shaking Michael's hand. Sarah's heart sank. She had known this conversation was coming, but hearing it begin felt like watching a slow-motion accident. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. Thank you for coming all this way, though I have to say I'm still not sure about this whole thing." Michael's expression softened slightly. "I understand this is a difficult decision, Mr. Mitchell, but my company is prepared to offer you substantially more than the current market value for agricultural land. This would give you and your family financial security for life." Sarah watched her father's face as Michael laid out the offer. The numbers were staggering. Enough money to pay off all their debts, buy a comfortable house in town, and retire without worry. But she could also see the pain in her father's eyes at the thought of selling the land that had been his life's work. What would happen to the farm, Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Michael turned to her, and for a moment, something flickered in his eyes that looked almost like regret. "We would develop it into a luxury residential community. High-end homes for people who want to live close to nature while maintaining all modern conveniences." "You mean you'd destroy it?" Sarah said quietly. "We'd transform it," Michael corrected gently. "Bring economic development to the area, create jobs, increase tax revenue for the local government." That evening, after Michael had returned to his hotel in the nearest town, Sarah sat with her parents in their small kitchen, the weight of the decision hanging over them like storm clouds. "The money would change everything, Sarah," her mother Linda said softly. "Your father could retire, get his hip surgery without worrying about the cost. You could go back to school, maybe travel, see the world." Sarah had gotten her agriculture degree from the state university, but she had come straight back to the farm after graduation. She had never questioned that choice until now. "But this is our home," she said. "This is who we are." Thomas reached across the table and took his daughter's hand. "Sweetheart, I'm not getting any younger. The farm is struggling, and you know it. Maybe it's time to face reality. Over the next few days, Michael stayed in town while the lawyers worked out the details of the potential sale. But he found himself returning to the Mitchell farm each day, ostensibly to discuss various aspects of the deal, but increasingly because he was drawn to something he couldn't quite name. Sarah found herself looking forward to these visits more than she cared to admit. Despite their different worlds, she discovered that Michael was intelligent, thoughtful, and genuinely interested in learning about farm life. He asked questions about crop rotation, animal husbandry, and sustainable farming practices with what seemed like genuine curiosity. "I grew up in Manhattan," he told her one afternoon as they walked through the orchard. "The closest I ever got to nature was Central Park. This," he gestured at the rolling hills and autumn colors, "this is completely foreign to me, but it's beautiful." "It's not just beautiful," Sarah replied, stopping beside a tree heavy with red apples. "It's alive. Every season brings something different. You plant in spring, tend through summer, harvest in fall, rest in winter. There's a rhythm to it that you can't find in the city." Michael reached up and picked an apple, biting into it. His eyes widened. "This is incredible. I've never tasted anything like this." Sarah laughed. "That's because you've been eating apples that were picked weeks ago, shipped thousands of miles, and sitting in storage. This one was on the tree an hour ago." As the days passed, something unexpected began to develop between them. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, they found themselves talking easily, sharing stories, discovering unexpected common ground in their love of books, their curiosity about the world, their dreams for the future. Michael told her about his life in New York, the high-stakes business deals, the luxury apartment overlooking the city, the social events and restaurants and culture. It sounded exciting and glamorous, but Sarah sensed something missing in the way he described it. "Don't you ever feel lonely?" she asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Michael was quiet for a long moment. "I never thought I did," he said finally. "But being here, seeing how you live, how connected you are to this place and these people, maybe I have been lonely and just didn't realize it." On his final evening in town, Michael asked Sarah to dinner at the small restaurant in the town center. It wasn't fancy by his standards, but the food was good and the atmosphere warm and friendly. "I have a confession to make," he said, as they shared a piece of apple pie made from fruit from her family's orchard. "When I first came here, this was just another business deal to me, a piece of property with development potential. But spending time here, getting to know your family, getting to know you, it's changed my perspective on a lot of things." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. Over the past week, she had found herself imagining what it would be like to see Michael's world, to experience the excitement and opportunities of city life. But she had also seen the way he looked at their simple farm life with something that looked like longing. "What are you saying?" she asked softly. "I'm saying that maybe there's a way to make this work for everyone. What if instead of developing the entire property, we preserved part of it as a working farm? You could continue farming, maybe even expand into agritourism. And..." He hesitated, then reached across the table to take her hand. "Maybe you could show me more of your world, and I could show you some of mine." The offer Michael presented to her parents the next morning was completely different from his original proposal. Instead of buying the entire farm, his company would purchase 50 acres for a small, environmentally sustainable housing development. The remaining 50 acres, including the farmhouse and most productive farmland, would remain with the Mitchell family. Additionally, his company would provide funding for Sarah to modernize the farm operation and develop it into a destination for urban families wanting to experience farm life. But there was a personal element to the offer as well. Michael asked Sarah to come to New York with him, to see his world, and decide if there might be a future for them together that bridged both their worlds. Standing in the kitchen where her great-grandmother had cooked meals for farm workers, where her mother had taught her to bake bread, where 4 generations of family memories lived in every corner, Sarah faced the most difficult decision of her life. "I need some time to think," she told Michael. That night, Sarah walked alone through the farm that had shaped her entire identity. She visited the apple orchard where she had played as a child, the barn where her grandfather had taught her to milk cows, the vegetable garden where she had learned that patience and hard work could create something beautiful and nourishing. But she also found herself imagining Michael's world, museums and theaters, restaurants where the chef was an artist, opportunities to learn and grow in ways she had never considered. And most of all, she imagined exploring that world with someone who was beginning to mean more to her than she had expected. The next morning, Sarah packed a single suitcase and climbed into Michael's BMW. New York City hit her like a physical force. The noise, the crowds, the towering buildings that blocked out the sky, everything was overwhelming. Michael's apartment was beautiful, sophisticated, with a view of Central Park that took her breath away, but it felt like living inside a magazine rather than a home. Michael threw himself into showing her his world with the enthusiasm of someone sharing his greatest treasures. They went to Broadway shows, ate at restaurants where meals cost more than her family spent on groceries in a week, visited art museums and galleries that housed priceless masterpieces. Sarah tried to embrace it all, tried to see the beauty and excitement that Michael clearly loved. And there were moments when she did, standing in the Metropolitan Museum of Art looking at paintings she had only seen in books, or listening to a world-class orchestra perform music that moved her to tears. But there were other moments too, moments when she found herself longing for the sound of wind through apple trees instead of car horns and sirens. When she missed the smell of fresh earth instead of exhaust fumes and cooking from 1,000 restaurants. When she realized she hadn't seen a real sunset in weeks because the buildings blocked the horizon. Michael seemed to sense her struggle, and he tried to help by finding ways to bring elements of country life into the city. They visited the farmers market in Union Square, spent time in Central Park's more secluded areas, even took weekend trips to farms in the Hudson Valley. "It's not the same," Sarah told him one evening as they walked through Central Park. "It's beautiful, but it's curated, controlled. At home, you never know what you're going to find. A fox in the chicken coop, a storm that changes everything overnight, the perfect tomato you've been watching ripen for weeks." "But look at all the opportunities here," Michael said, gesturing at the city lights twinkling around them. "Museums, theaters, universities, businesses. You could do anything, become anything." Sarah stopped walking and turned to face him. "But what if I don't want to become something different? What if I like who I am?" The conversation that followed was one of the most difficult either of them had ever had. They both recognized that they had fallen in love, not just with each other, but with the glimpses they had gotten of each other's worlds. But they also recognized that those worlds might be too different to bridge. "Come back to the farm with me," Sarah said finally. "Not just to visit, but to really try living there for a while. See if you could be happy there." Michael looked out at the city he had called home his entire adult life, then at the woman who had changed everything for him. "What about my business, my life here?" "You can run a business from anywhere these days. And as for your life here," Sarah paused, choosing her words carefully. "Is it really living, or is it just existing in a very expensive place?" The question hung between them as they walked back to his apartment, and Sarah could see that she had touched on something Michael had been thinking about but hadn't been willing to admit. 2 weeks later, they were both back in Meadowbrook Valley. Michael had arranged to work remotely for 3 months, bringing his laptop and city skills to the world of apple orchards and vegetable gardens. The transition was not easy for him. The slower pace frustrated someone accustomed to constant stimulation and immediate gratification. The physical work was harder than anything he had ever done. The isolation and quiet that Sarah found peaceful sometimes left him feeling restless and disconnected. But there were compensations too. He discovered the satisfaction of working with his hands, of seeing direct results from his efforts. He learned to appreciate the subtle changes that marked the progression of seasons. He began to understand what Sarah meant about the rhythm of farm life, the way it connected you to something larger and more enduring than quarterly profit reports. Most importantly, he saw Sarah in her element. Away from the overwhelm of the city, she bloomed like one of her apple trees in spring. Her confidence returned, her natural warmth and wisdom shone through, and Michael realized He was seeing the real Sarah for the first time since she had left the farm. They worked together to implement the changes his company was funding, improving the irrigation system, building a farm stand for direct sales, creating spaces where families could come to pick their own fruit and learn about agriculture. Michael discovered that his business skills, applied to farming, could make a real difference in productivity and profitability. But as the 3 months drew to a close, they both knew a decision had to be made. "I could be happy here," Michael said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge in a sky unpolluted by city lights. "Happier than I've been in years, actually. But I also know that giving up my life in New York would be a huge risk. What if I regret it? What if I end up resenting this choice?" Sarah took his hand. "And I could probably learn to be happy in New York, at least parts of it. But I would always be a visitor there, trying to adapt to someone else's world. Here, I'm home." They sat in comfortable silence, both understanding that they were facing one of those rare moments in life when there might not be a perfect solution, when love might not be enough to overcome fundamental differences in how they wanted to live. "There's something I haven't told you," Sarah said finally. "The local agriculture college has offered me a position developing their sustainable farming program. It would mean traveling, teaching, working with farms across the region. It's not the same as moving to New York, but it would be a way to grow professionally while staying connected to what I love." Michael squeezed her hand. "That's wonderful, Sarah. You should take it." "And there's something you haven't told me," Sarah continued with a small smile. "That you've been looking into sustainable development projects in rural areas, that you're thinking about starting a new division of your company focused on preserving agricultural land while still creating economic opportunities." Michael looked at her in surprise. "How did you know?" "Because I pay attention. Because I've seen how this place has changed you, just like your world showed me possibilities I'd never considered." Over the following months, they found their solution not in choosing one world or the other, but in creating a new one that honored both their dreams. Michael relocated his primary residence to a house he built on the edge of Sarah's family farm, close enough to be part of the farming operation, but designed with the amenities and technology he needed to run his expanding business. Sarah took the position at the agriculture college and threw herself into developing innovative programs that brought urban students to rural areas and helped small farms become more sustainable and profitable. Her work gave her the intellectual challenges and professional growth she hadn't known she craved, while keeping her rooted in the agricultural world she loved. Their wedding took place in the apple orchard where they had first really talked, surrounded by friends and family from both their worlds. Sarah wore her grandmother's wedding dress, which had been made by hand from fabric purchased at the general store in town. Michael wore a suit, but he had ditched the tie and rolled up his sleeves by the time they cut the cake. As the sun set on their wedding day, painting the sky in the same gold and pink that had witnessed their first kiss, Sarah and Michael stood together in the garden where she had been working the day they met. "Any regrets?" Michael asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Sarah leaned back against him, looking out at the land that had raised her and would help raise their children someday. "Only that it took a city millionaire coming to buy our farm for me to realize that home isn't just a place. It's wherever you can be completely yourself with the person you love." Michael kissed the top of her head, thinking about the life they were building together. Part farm, part business empire, part family legacy, part innovation. It wasn't the life either of them had planned, but it was better than anything either of them had imagined. Sometimes the greatest adventures don't require leaving home. Sometimes they require bringing someone home with you and discovering together what home can become. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories about love that bridges different worlds. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story that proves the best relationships don't require us to choose between who we are and who we could become. They help us become the best version of ourselves.